Ladies and gentlemen, this session will be followed up with startup session. We all know that India has become the third largest country that offers an ecosystem for startups in the world after US and China. And it's obvious to say that Andhra Pradesh has allocated a 17,000 square feet technological research and innovation park as a research and development laboratory. And during this session, the discussion would focus on what more does AP offer for startups. And this session will be moderated by Vijaya sir again. Our session chair is I, Vijaya Kumar Garu, the co-founder of Crayon Data and author. Huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And calling upon the very prestigious and eminent personalities of this panelists, may I call upon Nanda Kishore sir, the MD of APTS, as one of our important panelists. And may I call upon Professor Sai Chittaranjan, Assistant Professor of IIM Bangalore. And may I request Sri Ram Bhagavatullaji, the founder, Gramina Incubation Center, GIC. Huge round of applause. And now, may I request Mr. Ravi Eswarapu, the CEO of Andhra University Incubation Center. And may I call upon Ms. Santhoshi Buddhiraju, the co-founder of Mortgage Court. May I request Mr. Atul Mehta, the Senior Vice President of Razor Pay, to adorn the dais. And may I call upon Hemalatha, the serial entrepreneur, Forbes 30 under 30. There was one more sheet here about one more. Also calling upon Harshita Lakhan, the founder of All Is Well. Heartiest welcome to you, ma'am. I think it can't look more bigger and better than this panel. For all the esteemed dignitaries who are on the dais and for the session chair, Vijay sir, heartiest welcome to you. Let me thank you on behalf of Hans India in association with WTS Visakhapatnam, presenting to you Bizzbuzz Business Conclave 2022. Can you all clap for them for taking their times out in discussing the ideas, assessing the true potential of Andhra Pradesh as a potential hub for business in terms of upscaling in all the sectors. Thank you very much. Over to the session chair, Vijay sir, once again.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now.
I just want to remind that the session would last for 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Okay. And just let me know when the time is up.
Yeah, I'll be there, sir.
It's no longer time to track.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is visible as well, so that we can adjust the chairs if required. Are we visible for everyone? Okay. Okay. So welcome to the panel discussion. I will make some remarks on why the title is framed like this. It is framed as, is there an India template for startups? It is intentional to say India template or not Indian template, and I explain why. Okay. India template, we wanted to convey that it is about geo or region and not ethnicity. So there is some history here. The question that is often asked is what makes startups work in some regions and what makes some startups grow very well in certain region and not in other regions. It can be countries, it can be regions, etc. So is there any secret sauce? What happens and why it happens that way? Scale, innovation, impact. Of course, there are many views on what makes it work, but there are some learnings over centuries, I would say, on how people ask the same question. So if I define the startup is about innovation, creativity, now that we are in Vizag and in the Telugu heartland, I hope most of us will remember our high school studies, where most of the Telugu literature covers Vijayanagara Empire, 16th century to be specific. There is an interesting conversation. Creativity in 16th century is equated with writing poetry, right? Which is the most creative fashion. You can say music as well, but that came a little later, I would say. So the emperor, Krishnadevaraya, asked his main poet, Alasani Peddanna, for those people who remember history, when he awarded him for his famous work, Manu Charitra, which is actually originally is in Sanskrit actually. He was asked, why is it, the same question by the way, why is it that in certain places and some people can come up with such works of scholarship and creativity, while in some other places they don't? What makes a poet work or flourish? For those people who want to know the answer in pure Telugu, talk to me after the panel. I will repeat them in Telugu. But since I would like to be neutral to any particular language, I'll take to English. Okay? So he said 3 things are required. One is good food. Second is comfortable, of course he said swing, so comfortable place to sit. The third one is interesting one. He said we need people who can convert ideas into script or capture my imagination in some artifact. Those are the 3 required to make a great work of art or literature. That is in 16th century. In 2000, I think if I'm not mistaken, 2008, a similar question was asked in World Economic Forum. This time, replace poetry with innovation. What is it that makes a particular country, a particular region, or a state, or a city flourish or become a center for innovation or innovation leadership, while other places don't? So why is it that innovation works if you want tech, Bay Area, and theater works may New York and London? So what makes it work? There is a study done in World Economic Forum by a consultant from McKinsey. They made a big report, made task forces, and we submitted to World Economic Forum. I was one of the contributors. There are many things mentioned there, but one interesting point they mentioned is mobility of talent. Okay? A few years later, I would say maybe in 2010, so remove about 10 years in between, we asked the same question in the innovation summits in CII. And it was a very provocative title, which I only gave for a panel discussion. Do Indians innovate, or does India innovate? Because if you see most of the innovations across the world in tech, they actually come from India. So why is it that we can't do it in India? So there is something about the location, geo, environment, right? So this is the reason why this is titled, so for startups to grow, is there something which is specific to India which we should see? Because a lot of other financial models may work, technical models may work, but there is something else, right? It may be applied to a city or a state. So those are the reasons why such questions are asked. And that's the genesis of this discussion. Now there's another question we asked from a policy perspective, now that we have people from the policy side as well. As a part of National Council for Startups and MSME, the first question everyone asked, which I happen to lead the task force, what's the difference between MSME and startup? Well, to put it very bluntly, there are other definitions. MSMEs need working capital, startups need venture capital. Right? Now, of course, you may have a combination. So that's a different debate to have. But that's the fundamental reason. So then the question is, why will somebody invest venture capital if they don't know what the market is, what the exit is? So there are a lot of policy enablers which you need. So that is another topic which may differ from region to region, country to country, state to state, and perhaps city to city. So the purpose of this panel is not to impose a theoretical framework first, is to ask those people here on the panel who run startups, what has been their experience? And then from those insights, we go to people who run incubators, because they work with those cohorts, 15, 20 startups. What is their experience? Then we ask the academicians and the policymakers, what do they see, right? And then we will culminate into some kind of a call for action or an insight. Actually, the panel time may be short for all this, but we will try to touch upon each of them. So with that, I want to start my series of questions similar to the one what I asked before to the startups here about how they pick their problems. So let me start with the lady on the right. Start with you. How do you pick your problem, or why do you choose what you chose?
Thank you so much for the question. Good morning, everyone, on and off the dais. I started my professional journey in 2004 as a corporate employee and jumped to and switched to various professions thereafter. In all these new professions and jobs that I took up, I found myself always trying to fit, adjust, and also trying to make a lot of compromises with the environment, with the ecosystem of the corporate. But really nothing that I could have done then. I just continued my journey, tried to make myself happy, fit in wherever I was. This journey continued for a long time. There were breaks in between as well that I took off work due to personal reasons. In 2016, I became a behavioral skills trainer. I started working with corporate and B schools, training them on various behavioral aspects. Now, during my training, one of my clients came up to me and said or talked about their training requirement. The challenge they were facing at the organization was that most of the new hires in the organization were leaving the organization very quickly. The attrition rate for new hires was very high. So they wanted us to design a training program around that. But this problem was huge. Just one workshop or one session really couldn't have helped. So even I was actually wanting to know more about the problem. And I started to read more, to research and see what really is going around in the corporate world, to check the problem. Is it a problem that probably only I faced? Because I faced a similar problem, and the problem was also described by this organization. Through my research, I found that about 75 to 90% of new hires decide whether or not to stay in the organization within the first 6 months of their joining, and 15% actually leave the organization. Now, having faced similar problems and similar issues through my career, I thought this was the area I actually can work on. And I initially started with the idea of mental well-being. So all is well, my venture is into mental well-being. And we started with the idea of mental well-being for new hires. So that is how we started.
Thank you. Over to you.
For me at least, I started off with what I have been seeing. So I'm from Guntur. I've seen in Mangalgiri they manufacture these beautiful hand-woven fabrics. And at the same time, there was this sustainability wave which was happening in Europe, where a lot of brands like Arvind and etc. India also wanted to do capsule collections around this. So I saw the gap there, and that's what I started off with, connecting these cooperatives. worked with about 550 cooperatives, but sustainability didn't take off in India. That's another thing. But at least for the second one, I've been very choosy in terms of me having enough wiggle room to experiment with. It was very important that you do an idea map basically, and most of the times whatever you've started with will not work out. So you should have other avenues to pivot, other avenues to explore in the same sector at least, so that there is something around you can do that pivot around, either your customers or your product or your tech product. So yeah, so the second one at least I've chosen where, which is largely in e-commerce, and I felt like it's a growing sector and there's so much wiggle room, and a problem that I'm facing.
So I'll come to Atul now. I know you're not a co-founder, so I don't want to ask the question, how did you pick the problem? But I asked you the second biggest challenge in startups, which is product market fit. Now that you run sales, what are your reactions to product market fit, and how do you know you have achieved it?
Sure. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to tell you the genesis also. I've been in Resupe for almost 5 years now. Resupe started some 8 years ago. And it's very important to look at how and why it started. Two IIT Roorkee grads, Harshil and Shashank, both placed, Harshil in Schlumberger, Shashank in Microsoft US. Both of them working on a crowdfunding project part-time. Realized how difficult it is to accept payments in India. Okay, and both of them left their jobs, came to Harshil's place at Jaipur. Harshil's bedroom was our first office actually. And from then we started, and I joined Resupe when we were quite decently established, I would say. I was the 121st raiser, joined around 5 years ago. Now it's very important to understand what is the problem we are solving and why is it a problem. Money movement or fintech has always been regarded as a finance problem or a money problem. It is not a money problem. It is a tech problem. The problem is the banks are currently the custodians of my money, and they're doing it pretty well. They're designed to do it like that, but they have legacy systems and they cannot think beyond that. So when we started it, we said that fine, let's use technology. And I always say there are payment companies using technology. Razorpay is a technology company which is into payments. And that's the DNA difference. Many a times I am asked, who is your biggest competition? There are other companies, BillDesk, PayU, CC Avenue, Paytm. Good friends, they are not my competition. They are very good friends. Our competition is cash. Our competition is offline. For anything which you have to write something or go out somewhere is my competition. India is spending 1.8 to 2% of GDP only on printing notes. Printing those currency notes, security, we are spending 2% of GDP. US spends less than 0.8%. We are losing 1% of GDP just because we have to print notes. My person, why do we need to print notes? Currency notes is nothing but a trust factor. I give her 2000 ka note. She keeps it because it has a RBI governor's sign. I promise to pay the bearer a sum of 2000 rupees. If I can transfer that trust in some other way, let's do it here. Another thing that we are now doing is we are saying that it's not only inward money. Money doesn't stay anywhere. For good or for bad, money kahin rukta nahi hai. Everybody, any business accepts money, disburses money, lends money, borrows money, uses a corporate card, pays salaries, pays vendor payments. So at Resupe now we have full-fledged suite, inward money, outward money, vendor payment, salary, anything and everything that you do with money, we are doing it. So we call ourselves the ERP of fintech basically. We're solving all the problems. Two very distinct things that we do is, one is the technology part. Second is our, I say, disproportionate or a mind-boggling focus on people. Be it the raisers or be it our clients. When I'm asked, what do you work for? I work for my CTC. What is CTC? CTC is not cost to company. I'm not a cost, I'm a benefit to the company. CTC means my clients, my team and my company. Where do I invest? I invest in PPF. PPF is not public provident fund. PPF is put people first. Invest in people. They are the highest returning assets. They are the riskiest asset. The highest return is a company is all about a PPT. PPT is people, process, technology. Technology can be outsourced. Processes can be set. People is one who make or break a company. So if you have extreme faith in your people, give them technology, you can solve all the problems in the world.
Thanks, Atul. So, Santhoshi, I will ask you, you have two companies, I suppose,
Yes.
in two different domains. Running one startup itself is tough, but you seem to run two,
Yes.
and in two different domains. How did you pick the problems, and how do you run both the horses?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the question. So, the journey started in 2017, back then. So, the first one was into fintech. That was solving the problem of how somebody can get a home loan very quickly. So, what used to be a 1.5 month problem, because at that point, I was like looking for a home loan. And the entire process, like, why does it have to be so long? I have all my documents digitized. The lenders have all their rates, everything online. So why can't we have everything online, and why can't we make it a quicker process? Because that pain when somebody wants something and they have to wait 1.5 to 2 months to just get that. And buying a home is a dream come true for anybody, because that's generally your first home and it's something very valuable. So somebody has to go through that process for so long when it can happen quickly. So that was the first problem that we solved. And the second one, what I picked up, again, very proud to say, India is going a burgeoning growth. We want to be a 5 trillion economy. And the Atmanirbhar version, what we are speaking about of a self-reliant India, this has actually triggered a lot of infrastructure growth and a huge demand in agriculture production. And for all of this, all we need is machinery and mechanization to make it faster, quicker, because I think our goal is what we want to achieve very quick, and there's no other way but mechanization and machinery. I think COVID, what it taught us in last 2.5 years is we realized we are importing a lot of machinery. A lot of machinery is being imported. And for whatever infrastructure growth we need, you need your oil and gas pipelines underground, you need the urban and rural digitization, you need water pipelines, we need micro irrigation projects. So all of them, all you need is to dig the ground. So we are like, okay, this is what our country needs at this hour, or what we need in next 10 years. Think of bringing electric lines underground. If you have to do it in every street, the amount of effort, we can't do it manually, we can't do it with the equipment we have now. So that's when we were like, okay, how are we going to do it in a much faster pace? That's when autocracy machinery took its birth. We are currently attending, or I should say, answering to the needs of the country. We have provided machinery for Telangana fiber line. We are providing for micro irrigation projects across the country, for UP water, Jal Jeevan pipelines in Odisha, in Assam. But this is the only starting point. And we are like foraying now into agri-tech. When we say is, again, food technology, all of this is there. But still, earlier what happened was a farmer's son was a farmer. Now people are migrating to the urban cities. And the workforce in villages is becoming more and more scarce. So this is causing the farmers a lot of financial burn when they have to get any work done in their farmlands. So now, very interesting, apart from the infrastructure contractors and big B2Bs coming, a very nice thing is farmers are approaching me saying that I have seen this video on YouTube, I've seen it on a TikTok, can you make this machine for us? So when farmers are so interested in the technology, and if we as educated engineers, if we don't answer to the needs, I think it's a shame on us. So that's where we come in, and we are even entering into agri-tech and bringing in new innovative machinery into the country. So the way we chose the problem is something that's right in front of me. And the good thing is people who are having the problem are coming. And India, we are very conservative. We generally don't go again. I come from a very conservative family. So taking some risk or trying to do something new is generally tried to push back a bit. But now in the current setup, what is there in the scenario, or with the scarcity in the labor population, whatever is there, I think India is in the right spirit to go for new innovations and inventions. That way it is.
Thank you. We'll change gears and ask you. History shows that when you have intensity in one domain or a few domains, and it comes with a high local relevance is when innovation and startup culture happens. So that needs policy enablement. So what are your thoughts on that in the context of Vizag and AP?
See, government is essentially a problem solver, basically providing services to the people. So, is there an Indian way of startups? So what we are thinking is like government being a biggest service provider to the citizens of its state or central, wherever, whatever it is. So we are providing our startups a plethora of problems, statements. Basically, actually, every department is trying to provide certain services to the people at the grassroots level. So that is where that emotional connect will come. So what exactly are the problems of the people? To solve those problems, government has some old ways of solving those. Obviously, actually, they were doing it for the past many years. But here, if we can pose the same problem statement, and if any startup can come up with an innovation solution with much easier, with much ease or much less burden to the government, then that is a welcome change. So that is where actually we are pulling up the problem statements from all the departments from the government side, so that actually any startup which wants to work in certain areas, like she just now said agri-tech, edu-tech and all these things. So we do have this, all these sectors. In fact, actually agriculture is there. We have one incubator center in rural startups in Anantapur. All incubation centers and all, we have already started that. So likewise, so we have identified the departments, we have identified the problem statements, so that actually any startup which wants to serve, or ultimately to the people, definitely when you are serving to the government, it ultimately goes to the people, solving their issues. So that is one thing we are doing. Second thing is enablement. Like you said, MSME should have this working capital and this thing, venture capital and all, right? So to start to enable startups, so anyway, we are giving them the problem statement so that ideas may emanate. Second thing is, where do they work from? So that actually we have built up some incubation spaces across the state. There are some 4 or 5 incubation centers, including one in Vizag, one in Kakinada, one in Anantapur. All these things, the places are there. That is the second thing. So that actually we are providing them a space to work on, to work out whatever solutions they want to work out. Second thing. Third thing, who are the mentors? Like they do have some idea actually to execute that. So what is the right way? So that mentorship, partnership, that's where we chip in. Like actually, this is where some mentors are there. Mentor pool we are maintaining, so that actually if anybody wants to use the services of the mentors, then they can use those things. And fourthly, they need some testing setup. Actually, they don't by themselves can't afford to do that. So that so we have formed 2 centers of excellence here in Vizag itself. One with the partnership with the STPA here in Vizag Steel. Second is in NASCOM center in our AU, Andhra University. So both the centers of excellence are up and running. Apart from that, we do have a startup policies where actually a host of measures have been given to them, including the financial incentive stuff. So that these are the 5 areas that we are working on. That is already kept in place. So anybody who wants to utilize them, they are welcome.
Just a follow-up question. The classical playbook for a government-initiated grand challenges, if you want to say, or thematic, generally the government is a passive investor. They will enable initially with the capital. But when they collaborate with an active investor, like a venture capital firm, then the growth and the marketability is much higher. In the context of AP, do you have such a venture fund, and do you collaborate with other VCs so that as a combination it appeals to any promoter, which also improves the appeal of the state and the city?
Yeah. See, venture fund, we have kept aside a venture fund of 100 crores in our budget, but that is a pool of money. It's not entirely from the government side, but it is a pool of money from the different venture capitalists also. That funding setup is there. That's where in the policy also we mentioned.
Thank you. So I'll come to the incubators now. My question to you is, you see many startups in your cohorts, right? And you see a mix of campus people or freshers starting on their own, which is good, high energy. Then you also have people who left their corporate careers and start kind of a midlife career change. In your view, like it happens in schools, is there a vertical grouping of age here? That means, do you think there is value if you mix an experienced entrepreneur with a fresh entrepreneur and the cross-learning happens? What has been your experience, from an incubator perspective? I know in all of you.
Thank you. Very good afternoon to all. Yeah. My experience, basically, I've been with the corporate. Last corporate was heading quality at Tech Mahindra, and then one successful exit, and then 4 startups that I run, which are all profitable, thankfully. Have taken up a pro bono sort of an exercise of setting up an incubations ecosystem. I call it ecosystem, but an incubation center in itself, I think, doesn't serve the purpose. An ecosystem in Nanda University. What we currently do, one on the engineering side, campus side of things, we've got, as like Sir was talking, we've got NASCOM's Center of Excellence into the campus. We're building our own 25,000 SFT of our incubation space, which is tech-driven. And we got STPI already sign up in a phase 1 of 25,000 SFT, building to a 70,000 SFT there. Then we conveniently forget the non-tech sector, but we got that into this thing, which is on the southern side of the campus. We got a 60,000 square feet of pharma, biotech, genomics, food tech, food processing and testing labs. So sort of this thing which we are now trying to get into a JV with Ramki to commercially run it as a JV. We also got marine incubation out there, and we are adding. So what we have done yes, you're very right in saying that when you're talking about especially this area of space where entrepreneurship is not imbibed, like in Gujarat, you find this at a very young stage, you are learnt the value of how to earn and how to spend, which is largely missing in this area of this thing. The students are not very much aware of the financial, literacy with respect to how to earn and spend money. So while they have ideas, so there is somewhere you need to have that spark coming in, ignite it, get them to come forward. Experiential learning, just like when what Kranti, I think, was talking about in Sustained Card, as part of the whole system, and then probably understand the nuances of what entrepreneurship and then get into it for the students, because today you cannot depend on corporate to absorb everybody coming out of the campus, and you expect more entrepreneurship to come in from the campuses. So creating that ecosystem where the first idea is to get in all these into these incubation centers is slightly MVP or growth stage startups which are revenue making. That also ensures my sustainability as myself as an incubation center as a startup, which is basically I'm earning co-working space money, and so that these people are coming in. Then get the other the partners in this incubation or ecosystem. We got the mentors, given them space to operate from the same in the heart of the city. Very much happy. So I'm part of TIE. TIE is coming. We got local mentor partners like Alco partners. There are few in the local ecosystem who come and sit and operate from these centers within the heart of the city. I say, forget your office, come and operate from this. Then we got, of course, all the support systems, whether you're talking about patenting this thing like NRDC, service here, and then we got our own IPR chair. We got all these enablers who ensure that there's a completeness in your ecosystem, including I myself as an angel investor, but we got the, but when it comes to large investment, again, have to think slightly out of the box, because I don't have great funds to run this whole show. So went and tied up with T-Hub saying, MSR, I don't have a, if one of my startup is graduating and is coming out good, it's in a growth stage, I need fund. So let me tie up with your funding team, which you spend about ₹1 crore in per annum, trying to find funds for them. You take a finder fee of 4%, let's share 2% each, and I'll give you startups to say. So some way we created that ecosystem within the thing. And what we've done is we opened it to the students and faculty. See, largely one other component we forget in this whole ecosystem is faculty who apply for research projects, who need a industry backing, which now government DST is accepting startups as an industry backing to experiment and come up with new stuff. So that what has led to is students coming in, experientially learning what's happening in this whole ecosystem, understand what startup is live within the whole thing, and then slowly understand and then take what is sort of a mentor-based or a self-realization or call whether, okay, maybe I would try this, or at least seed that bug inside them, like maybe I've turned an entrepreneur at 40, later they would think of, okay, after having a good amount of corporate life, would want to think enough is enough, let me earn money for myself and then start off something, or maybe do something which is social entrepreneurship. So that's how we're trying to, it's like when you say industry, academia, this thing, we're saying let's get that industry which starts with startups, or big guys like Ramki to run something which is corporatized and channelized process, which is the PPT thing, into the campus and then run the whole system so that students experience it. They finish their classrooms, they enter into these centers. People who are interested. So we're keeping them 24/7 open. Come in and work whatever you want to. That helps even the startups get interns at a low cost, the Jugaad innovation things. So it's overall it's helping. We've been quickly able to incubate a lot of student startups and get that interest going on into the ecosystem. So that's how we're trying to build this.
Okay, so we'll go with you then, and what is your experience?
So thank you for the invite. I think I represent Grameen Incubation Center. And this is backed by an organization called Bagatla Charitable Trust. We are a 46-year-old organization that has been in integrated rural development. And I have been heading this organization for the last 12 years. And gone through the entire gamut of development process. We were one of the pioneers of getting women in development. About 1 to 1.5 acres. So they have subsistence agriculture, they have the prime of their life, they are stuck because the children are there. So how do we address this problem? And then the other component we looked at was persons with disabilities. So these are the main areas we were looking at and felt that if we build entrepreneurship, can we look at building existing we shouldn't say micro, nano entrepreneurs? Because the whole startup journey, the initial hump of what to do, how to do, way to do, so those are all have been solved by a micro entrepreneur. You know, they've already gone through that cycle and they've put a business in the village. So if we look at nano entrepreneurs and then give them mentoring and then give them whatever the appropriate technology that is needed, because we are part of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technologies program as Center of Excellence in Agriculture and Agri-Tech. We felt that instead of doing the hackathon and then startup, we rather look at preparing micro-entrepreneurs and then give them the appropriate technology. So we're now looking at the next level of can we get ahead of the curve. We have an ITI and a high school. We're looking at can we look at entrepreneurship? Can we look at teaching them Internet of Things or drone or robotics to some extent, so that we need rural startups for rural India. We have no idea what their lives are. Just as we do question outside countries talk about what the problems we have, our answer is, Mr. Jaishankar was asking, US has its own problems. Why US is questioning India on energy? The same way, who are we to answer rural India's problem when we have no idea what they're living? So we want to build up on that And so Grameen incubation, we want to look at building micro entrepreneurs, developing entrepreneurship, and appropriate technology.
Thank you. So we'll come to the professor. And also you have experience at NSR Cell, which has been there for a long time. And so I'll be keen to know what are the differences you find between, I mean, I know that IMP mentors, so maybe there, here. So is there any difference you find in terms of models which are state variations, all right? Or ecosystem variation, if I would say it, and your thoughts.
Thank you. So let me reconnect with the story that you started off with. What does an incubator do? We provide that food, we provide that swing, and we hope that they convert an idea into reality. That's what we do as an incubator. And your other question that you raised, that experienced people with experience from the industry and a fresher, where is that synergy really coming from? If you look at all the startups who are on this panel, if none of them had questioned, that, or if they were conditioned by the industry to accept attrition as a fact of life, or that money is what payments are all about, or that machinery we just need to import, this is what the industry could kind of condition you towards. But a fresher can question these fundamental assumptions as to how value is actually created and consumed. And that freshness can only come in a campus. You are not burdened with your day-to-day deliverables, monthly deliverables, year-end targets. Nothing is there on your plate. You're aware of all the latest happenings that are out there. And the difference in the regional ecosystems also comes from the fact, like Sriram rightly pointed out, the solution has to be contextualized where the problem is actually happening. And that is kind of reflected in the source of where these ideas are coming from. Different solutions that are coming from different regions are characterized by the context from which they're emerging. And so the fresher brings in that challenge to the perspective that payments industry is more about technology. Fintech is about technology. What can we do with that? Innovation, Atmanirbhar Bharat is not about just importing. Can we do something else? Can we question and recreate value? Can I stop accepting what the industry is conditioning me to do? That is a huge benefit that is really out there. Yes, challenging the status quo. And since I also work on family businesses, this is something that we saw when the initial set of the family heirs or the princes, they returned from foreign education. They changed the way that family businesses worked. The elders had a different conception as to how the business model should work. But the next generation is changing it, challenging it, and creating new value.
So I have a follow-up question to you and involve Ashita, given your academic bent of mind. So it's a very famous debate, or a holy grail, that is entrepreneurship, can it be taught, or are you born with it, right? So there's enough literature to read about. But when you are running an incubator, or when you are an investor trying to invest in a company, alternatively, if you are a corporate trying to promote entrepreneurship, how do you select a person from their behavioral and other mindset? What kind of attributes, which are purely the softer attributes and not the hard skills, right? It's not about they know Python or TensorFlow, it doesn't matter. So what are your views on such softer aspects in promoting this? Maybe I'll go with you and then.
Yeah. So this is a problem that we have been grappling. If you look at the education model today, we are solidly conditioning students to become managers. Look at their entire academic career. You work extremely hard to get a good score in the 10th standard so that you get a good 12th standard score so that you become an engineer, to land a good job, or you crack CAT, hopefully make it to an IIM, and you want to be managers. And if you go and tell these students in the classroom that become entrepreneurs, it is a cognitive dissonance for them. We came here to be managers. We did not come here to be entrepreneurs. When I was at Ahmedabad itself, we had started a course for the MBA students on entrepreneurial mindset. It was a core course. The elective was more popular. Now at IIM Bangalore, we are doing the same thing. We have a core course on entrepreneurial mindset. This is where a reality that we accept. Students who are necessarily graduating fresh from the campus, they have a lot of other responsibilities that they want to, lot of other goals that they want to immediately accomplish. Therefore, we cannot break the behavioral trend immediately, but we plant a seed. It will take fruit at some point of time. And there has to be, entrepreneurship is also about a lot of self-selection that has to happen. The person has to actually choose. It is not just about an idea and the evaluation of an opportunity. It is about commitment, the most important part. And that is for the individual to self-select themselves that I will become an entrepreneur.
Thank you so much. Entrepreneurship, can it be learned? I think I will link it to the point, to the theme of the whole session today, which is about, does India really have a startup template? So I think a few years back, maybe 6 or 7 or maybe more, there was a culture in India where the business models would be replicated from the West, mainly US, and probably they would customize it a bit, with all due respect to all the startups which have been there in that field. But yes, that was what was being done. And little customization and they would launch. So let me just get to an example for a better understanding. So we saw Flipkart, who launched with the same business model as Amazon. And we all know when they launched in the year 2007, they did not really do well. So the business they started with was what Amazon started, sale of books. That didn't really work for them. The point here, which I would like to highlight here is, any template, especially in India, would not really work as it is. And with that point, entrepreneurship cannot just be learned. It is more of an experiential journey wherein probably we fail several times. I'm sure all the startups here, or if you've had an idea or spoken to someone, we've had this idea once in our mind, did I take the right decision? So I was referring to that. I have asked this question several times. Was this a right decision I took to get back to startup? But yes, it's all about experiential learning and learning from your customers, your feedback. So the initial idea I had talked about, I started with mental well-being training for new hires. That didn't kick off at all. So that's a part of a service we offer now. But I had to change that idea and pivot because of customer validation. And we now provide mental well-being solutions for employees in different sectors in the corporate. So if I get back to Flipkart, what they did in 2010 was they came up with cash on delivery feature, and that was something that was a change maker in the whole game for them. And they were able to take it forward. In fact, they became one of India's first unicorns. So on the whole, I feel entrepreneurship is all about learning with your experience. It's an experiential learning. You fail, and we just need to stand back and keep walking. So that's my take on it.
Very good views on entrepreneurship can be learned or not learned. I have a contra view to it. You need not learn it. All of us don't need to be entrepreneurs. Okay? Because if all of us become entrepreneurs, तो काम कौन करेगा? Right? So it's about ownership. It's about intrapreneurship. It's about owning my part of the problem. If you remember that Hero Honda ad, fill it, shut it, forget it. I tell all of my team members to be like that. Fill it, shut it, forget it. Fill it means somebody told you the problem. Shut it means you understand it. Forget it, and that person can forget about it. And you need not do this only in corporate thing. Do it in your day-to-day life. I'll give you a small example. Ram called me up on Wednesday to come here. Thursday, my flight was supposed to be booked by Mr. Narasimha. He did not book the flight, whatever reasons. I called him up 6 times. 6 times because I could actually have stayed out of it कि नहीं flight होगी तो नहीं जाऊँगा क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है मुझे. But नहीं. Because I have said कि मैं जाऊँगा तो it is my problem now. The only thing that all of us need to do is whatever we are doing, we need to take complete ownership of it. There's a book by Jocko Willink called The Art of Extreme Ownership. That's the US Navy SEALs who did this Bin Laden thing. Read it if you haven't. It tells you that extreme ownership is the solution to all the problems, and all of us don't need to be entrepreneurs.
So going with our experiences, when we started our high school way back in 1996, we started the residential high school with 27 girls and 16 boys. That was a time when a girl who attains a puberty cannot go to school. The average age of marriage, the region we were working was 12. No kidding. So we said, we put our head down and said, we'll create an opportunity for girls to study. So now the girls have pushed the marriage to 20. Then we talked about vocational education. We said, you need to be vocationalized. You need to get into vocational education. We don't need degrees. Now we see last 6 years that girls are getting into technical education. We said, we'll give you rurally biased education. 84% of our alumni for the past 25 years continue to stay in the villages and work around. So now when we're looking at entrepreneurship, we need to put our head down and say, this is what we'll do. We don't need everyone, as he rightly said, everyone to convert immediately. It's a process. It's a mindset process. Now people, I was telling my son one day, he was like answering back. I said, why are you answering? I never did to my father. He was 6 years old. He's like, that's your problem, right? So they have absolutely no hang-ups. It's the same generation. When you look at India, we are 35 years and below, 60% of the population. They have no hang-ups about what my parents did, what I want to do. So let's catch that mindset and say, give them something different. Why don't you start looking at your own problem? So can we create that ecosystem? Can we create that space where it is safe to fail? And as they have no responsibilities whatsoever. So therefore, sooner or later, we should have rural youngsters coming into thinking, say, I need a problem. All we need to do is create man-eaters. Say, this is where you can do it, and these are the technologies that are available. I'm sure they'll pull it out.
Yeah. So I'll just add here. See, any degree granting program, kind of an educational institution, will teach. Vocational courses you can train, but entrepreneurs you need to incubate them, and then after they reach a particular stage, you need to accelerate them. So an educational institute which is looking to promote entrepreneurship should not confuse the two. You cannot teach entrepreneurs. You have to incubate them. You have to let them fail. You have to let them pivot. And the same is true even for corporate entrepreneurship programs. You have to let them work within that space. And the same is true even for family businesses. A youngster is trying to take over, set aside a little bit of capital, let them fail with it. It's okay. Let them incubate. And then they will accelerate after a point of time.
I have a question for you on the ecosystem design. So if you come from the merger and acquisition field, M&A, there's a very popular playbook that a company A acquires company B. So how do you need a synergy which is more than A plus B, right? So it's A into B. So the typical playbook in the Western world at least is that I use 1/3 of the people from my company A, 1/3 of the people from company B, and I recruit the other 1/3, so that the mix will give you the vibrance and the tenacity and all the commitment, etc. So it's a mix of old and new in that sense. Now when it comes to ecosystems, especially startups, one of the things, especially in India, in those cities where there are enough ventures locally who are growing well, and you help them to grow organic, you incubate new, which is greenfield, then you invite maybe the global corporations or national corporations to set up something here so that the mix will give you the good depth and good breadth, right? So e-commerce in Koramangala in Bangalore, it can be operating systems in Pune, it can be semiconductor design in Noida. So you can pick and choose the areas, right? Or gaming in Kerala, stuff like that, right? what are those factors in your view as a policy maker enabler for the city and the state? And you have any thoughts in that direction?
See, few initiatives from the government side, from the industry side as well. See, the new investments that actually we are focusing on IT and electronics basically for IT basically for Vizag, and the electronics, there are a couple of electronic manufacturing clusters in the state. So recently there are four electronic manufacturing clusters which are highest in the country, and definitely we are world's largest OEM, ODM and everything, even original design manufacturer. Wingtech is here and Foxconn is here, Dixon is there. So large giants are already there and operating within Andhra Pradesh. So that is in electronic sector. See, here startups come, role of startups come. Recently, 2 or 3 months back, actually we tied up with Indian Navy here in Vizag. So it's surprising to know that almost 90% of their components, more than 90 in fact, actually they are, for their needs, they are importing from different countries. And he said that almost 60% of them can be manufactured here by MSMEs or startups. So that is a one revelation. And Atmanirbhar Bharat, actually he wanted to do that. So he tied up, Indian Navy has tied up with us, Apicha, so that actually next within 1 month or so, we are conducting a showcase kind of thing, inviting all the startups, so that actually whether they are good at designing something for them, or he said actually they will give that design diagram also, so that actually they can work on, and if they are impressed, they will take, entire Navy will take them on board, so that they will start manufacturing for Navy. That is one example of collaborating with different sectors. And the second thing, see, government is a biggest marketplace. So I said, I spoke about enabler, but now I am coming to biggest market. It is the largest spending agency, spending entity than any other startup, than any other company in fact. So how to tie up this marketplace with the startups is the second area. So there are tenders, there are some other activities, like actually government invites many companies to do work on their parts, or whatever solutions they wanted, and all these things will happen. But no government department will be readily accept any startup to provide services, because they don't want to take that risk, because ultimately there is a time frame within the government, and within that time frame they have to give those services to the people. So if they take some startup on board, and by chance if that startup has failed, then they can't start over again. So that is the biggest threat that government departments are having. To alleviate that, so I also had AP Technology Services, which actually I can enter MOUs to the startups. Basically, actually, if what we think, like actually they can deliver services, so that it is APTS that will give services to the government, so that one government agency giving services to the another government department, there won't be any problems. But ultimately, it is the startup that is going to get. So this is the way that we found out. Like actually, I can enter into any of MOU with any of the startups. So if you want to agri-tech or edu-tech, wherever actually, if you want to provide services to the government of Andhra Pradesh, you can enter into MOU with APTS, so that APTS in turn will provide services. That way, I can get the market access to the startup. That is second thing. And yeah, the third one you asked about. Attracting talent outside. Yes. See, attracting talent in terms of investments. Exactly. So there are two issues. One, he said actually catch them young from the education side. So there are innovation cells within the colleges, but what happened is for the last 2 years, most of the colleges have been shut down, and actually those innovation cells are almost, they are not defunct now. So right now we are again starting that exercise, so that actually almost all the colleges wherever throughout the Andhra Pradesh will be having innovation cells. So that is one thing. And Definitely, we are inviting international companies here. We are inviting international people here so that actually they can help us out. They can help us out in this. Suppose, for example, that reserve is there, for example. So that amount of transactions that a government does per day runs into some crores and crores of transactions. One single pensions, there are a number of crores are there. So likewise, even recently we all cinema theaters will be online. So number of tickets sold. So these things actually I'm talking about. There are n number of opportunities for everyone, for every sector. You need to know the right way of approach or how to do, how to get into the government place is the only thing. Then that's what APTS pitches.
As a process check, how much time we have for the panel? Can someone answer? How much time we have?
Almost done, sir.
Almost done?
Yeah.
So,
Oh, we have 15 more minutes, sir.
15 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
So I have, so I think we obviously want some audience Q&A. So what I thought I would do is that I have made some summary of my learnings in all these years on what I see as the India template or the differences. Since we don't have much time, I'm going to actually read out that so that everyone hears what my essence is. It may not be the whole truth, but contains some truth for sure. And then we will open up for Q&A. That should do? That's okay with you? Okay. So I made a long list, sorry. So I'll just read it. So I've seen at least 5 or 6 states in India and a few other countries on cross-border innovation, right from Singapore to Israel to US to Russia to Japan, and also most of the Indian states who are active in startups. So I have some comments to make. I would say I've spent enough time in corporate, worked with venture capital from 1998. So I have just culminated all that into some kind of a series of views. So here is, what I think. I think India template, on the first question I asked before is how do you pick a problem? We typically come with a problem solving mindset. So we tend to solve a problem we face, what you would call in American terms, daily challenges, right? If there is no water in the pipeline, you try to innovate there, right? Tomorrow there is no power, you will innovate there. Because it's normally what you face every day, as opposed to a very developed economy where you think something else. So this is a kind of problem-solving mindset which seems to shape the way you pick a problem in a startup, especially when you want to get a business using the startup product, because they say that if it is too far down the line, they can't relate to a current problem. It'll be very innovative, but I won't pay for it because it's too far down the line. So if you can't link it to the current state and the future state, it won't fly most of the time. So very highly transformational deals are difficult to get through without some support, unless if it is government which is buying it, right? In which case they can afford to do it. If I now say that I will replace all the motors ever used in Indian defense with electric motors, oh well, then of course all the EVs will line up, right? So that's how you create demand. But if you don't say it, nobody's going to change. So this is one of the problem-solving mindset, or in management terms, the focus on immediacy and relevance. The moment the relevance and immediacy is not there, you pretty much don't get any more money, right? The other thing which is very unique in India is that anything you touch has a lot of scale in India, right? So showing scale with 100 users, 1,000 users, 10,000 users may not be a problem. It is only when you cross after you finished all your friends, contacts, LinkedIn, is when it actually starts starting. The interesting part of scale in India is that it is good on scale, but it's low on depth. So if you have product offerings or solution offerings which have a very deep engagement, whether it is financial markets, whether it is retail market, whether it is utility markets, deep tech ones take time. So I think this is one thing I I find very, it's good for scale to test, but the depth is not very there. It may be very significantly from sector to sector. Maybe in fintech we are quite advanced. We are advanced maybe in mobile, but we are not advanced in a lot of other things, right? The third one, which is actually the reason why I have to write a book initially, most of the funding in the initial phases is informal. That means you call your friends, you call your in-laws, you call your parents, friends in courts, and the way they are treated on the books is subject to a lot of debate. So when an investor comes in and start asking, what is this money? They say, no, it's given. What is that? Debt, equity, grant. So the answers can be very interesting once you tell the valuation of the company, even if it's from relatives. So this informality in fundraising in the initial stages is actually a problem because the paperwork does not reflect, actually it doesn't exist. It's the same issue for revenues and costs. I asked one startup, Bangalore by the way, do you have book of accounts? He said, yes. So you
He's not going to be from a channel again. Right? If you go and ask who said it works, most probably they're the friends. Right? Or maybe they were there before. It's okay. But I need professional validation, which is one of the challenges point, especially good tier 2 and tier 3. In tier 1, people get reward. That is also the reason why you need a mix of international and national. Because the mindset gets changed. A point again on tier 1, tier 2, there is a difference in access. Yes, in tier 1 cities it works. In tier 2, tier 3, not all cities work in the same way. Especially if you are a woman entrepreneur, you got a code or need or a customer, it can be interpreted very differently. So the challenge, what women face in those cities, we can't say no. It doesn't work like you are sitting in Bangalore or something. It does take some time. I would also say on mentorship, full-fledged finance account stream, we wrote a finance stream is a problem. For a large company, sponge is not a problem. Like an asset creation phase. If you are 35 and you trying to buy a house, or you are trying to get married, if you work for a startup, you are an asset limited. If you are 22, maybe it is not. Right? These are the things I find as some of the India contemporary issues. Some of them can be solved with an annual mentorship, some of them can be solved as well. So with that, we have time for Q&A or we will go lunch?
Does anybody...
Let me also reprise you. I am Dr. Sahu from NRIC Vijaya. We are present here at Visakhapatnam. I would just like to reprise you. One size of soup cannot fit all. We must have realized the need of the hour today. In fact, I am so happy some of the records what it has been presented. Only thing, we have an ecosystem, but whether our ecosystem is enabling. Second, the challenge for India today. In fact, challenge because we are doing a lot of evaluation for the startup India, who startup who get the tax benefit from government of India. Here I want to just advise you is the challenge before us is not the service innovation. Today challenge for us is product innovation. You see 80% of the product India is import. Any product. So for that, we need to connect, we need to collaborate, we need to coordinate. And we have a lot of program initiatives because we have 900 universities in the country, 11,000 engineering colleges. I am coming to the point. Yeah, my question is not to the, because they are fantastic people those who are doing and connecting the dot to the nation and nation building. Here I am here to just present how we can. We have a lot of fun for IIT. We have many mechanisms for connecting to the startup and also MSME. One is what we are using is intellectual property protection. When I was globally last 2 months back at Europe, I saw and I feel bad some about India. Because my concern is facing difficulty at global arena. That is special region. To all the startups to protect fast, get your right fast. We are talking about right, take your intellectual property right, patent, trademark, design, copyright. This is the knowledge economy. We are not protecting, we have seen in the case of Neem and Basmati. Thank you, Chair, for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. I think that's it for today. One of you kindly answer that. I don't know if that was a question. He stated some facts, right?
That's okay. We can.
Yes. Thank you very much. Requesting the team from Hansen here to present a token of gratification for our esteemed dignitaries here, the panelists who have taken out their time in running us by all the awareness that we all need to know about startups. Ladies and gentlemen, I request you all to give it up for Vijaya sir, who was moderator for both the sessions. I think he did a brilliant job as a moderator and also came up with precise points. There's a lot of homework done, putting all his experience into paper and presenting it to all of us. And huge round of applause for Sai Chittaranjan Garu, Buddhiraju, Ravi, Eswarapu, Santhoshi, Buddhiraju, Nanda, Hemalatha, Nanda, Kishore, for sharing his points since yesterday. Thank you very much. And before we head to the next panel discussion, which is going to be about